Not every source of light is here to guide you. Some are here to blind you, just enough so you stop looking where you were going and start following where they lead. They don't manipulate with pressure. They don't invade with force. They wrap you in warmth, in presence, in just enough comfort to make you think, finally, someone who sees me. And in that moment, your guard drops, not because you were naive, but because your soul has been aching for someone who feels safe enough to relax around. That's the brilliance and the danger of toxic light. It doesn't push you. It pulls you. It doesn't demand. It reflects. It mimics your language. It mirrors your heart. It glows just enough to make you think, maybe I've found home. But what you've actually found is a carefully engineered resonance, not to uplift you, but to guide you slowly, gently, away from your center. In this episode, we're going to talk about the most seductive form of spiritual manipulation. The person who doesn't try to control you through fear, but through spiritual warmth. They're not loud. They're not harsh. They're attuned. They speak in insights. They say things that echo something inside you didn't even know had a voice. And that's what makes it feel real. But what you're feeling isn't truth. It's emotional entrainment. The Stoics warned us, not of fire and force, but of influence that erodes clarity. Marcus Aurelius wrote, just that you do the right thing. The rest doesn't matter. But toxic light makes the right thing feel vague, because when you feel seen, you stop seeing clearly. And that's when the pull begins. This isn't a message of paranoia, it's a map of awareness. We're not here to call everyone dangerous. We're here to learn how to tell the difference between real light and light designed to lead you just far enough away from yourself to make you dependent. So if you've ever found yourself drawn to someone who felt almost divine, but left you spiritually confused, this episode is for you. Let's begin. When warmth becomes weaponized, the subtle art of emotional glow that distracts and disarms. Warmth is healing. It opens us, softens us. It makes the nervous system feel like it can finally exhale. But when someone uses warmth not to connect, but to access, what they've given you is no longer light. It's a lure. The most dangerous kind of manipulation isn't the aggressive kind. It's the kind that feels like comfort, until you realize you've slowly surrendered your direction for the illusion of safety. These are the people who speak in spiritual tones, who see your soul, who validate your depth, who say all the right things, but only in rooms where they maintain energetic control. Their language is soft, their insights are real, but their intention is not to empower you. It's to become the center of your gravity. And it happens slowly. You start checking in with them before you make a move. You seek their affirmation before you trust your truth. You feel guilt if you grow beyond their guidance. That's not mentorship. That's emotional domestication. They didn't chain you. They simply gave you light, with just enough heat to keep you near. The Stoics warned us about this seduction. Epictetus taught, freedom is the only worthy goal in life. But freedom cannot live where dependence is dressed as devotion. Toxic light doesn't dim you. It makes you feel so seen, so mirrored, so understood that you stop needing to see yourself. That's the trick. You don't lose yourself in darkness. You lose yourself in reflection. Ask yourself, am I being seen or studied? Am I connecting or being calibrated? Do I feel freer around this person or just more understood in a way that makes me stay? There is a difference, and when warmth is weaponized, it stops being a gift. It becomes a spell, cast not to harm you instantly, but to guide you slowly into emotional alignment with their vision, not yours. So the next time someone feels like the only one who gets you, pause. Notice how your energy shifts. Does your center expand or subtly surrender? Because not all glow is divine. Some is designed, and Stoic awareness is what keeps you from mistaking the warmest hands for the ones that hold your best interests. Warmth should open you, not own you. The false healer pattern, when they use spiritual insight to make you dependent. They don't demand authority. They earn your trust, not through power, but through presence. They see you, they name your pain. They use words that feel deeper than most people ever reach. You don't feel threatened, you feel safe. at first, but slowly something shifts. You stop listening to yourself. You start running everything through their filter. You defer your knowing because they always seem to know better. And just like that, you've mistaken healing for hierarchy. This is the false healer pattern. It starts with resonance. It ends in spiritual dependency. They show up as the one who gets you when no one else does. They give you language for wounds you didn't even know how to name. They pull insights from the air and say, this isn't just advice, it's truth. But their truth always requires you to come back, to ask again, to stay near, because without your dependence, their light has no audience. The Stoics warned us about borrowed wisdom. Seneca said, the greatest obstacle to living is expectancy, which hangs upon tomorrow and loses today. But modern spiritual manipulation hangs your clarity on someone else's next word, their next insight, their next affirmation that you're doing it right. And when that happens, you stop being the healer of your own soul. You become the client of their charisma. Here's how you know the difference. A true guide points you inward. A false healer pulls you back. A true guide celebrates your independence. A false healer calls it resistance or ego. A true guide respects your silence. A false healer fills it with interpretation you didn't ask for. And ask yourself, do I feel freer after our conversations or more dependent? Do they trust me to choose or do I feel pressure to stay close? If I walked away, would I still trust myself to navigate? Because the moment your intuition becomes something you outsource to someone else's spiritual perception, you are no longer walking in truth. You are walking under suggestion, disguised as healing. And the Stoic knows, real clarity never creates dependency. It creates stillness, space, strength. So the next time someone reads your soul and says they can help you go deeper, asking, will I still know who I am when they're not in the room? Because any light that erases your inner compass, no matter how enlightened it looks, is a trap dressed as guidance. And you, my friend, were never meant to heal through submission. Energetic seduction, not sexual, but spiritual. Seduction doesn't always begin with touch. It doesn't always speak in flirtation or desire. Sometimes it speaks in silence, in the way someone looks at you like they already know, in the way their presence feels like gravity, gentle, irresistible, sacred. This is energetic seduction, not of the body, but of the soul. You didn't fall for their words. You fell for their frequency, how they mirrored your values, echoed your pain, reflected your healing language back at you just enough to make you think, they see the real me. But what you didn't realize was that they were shaping that real you with every conversation. Not with lust, but with alignment, engineered to bypass your guard. You weren't pulled in by charm, you were pulled in by resonance. But not all resonance is truth. Sometimes it's calibration. They don't offer their essence. They mold themselves to match yours. And in doing so, they become indispensable to your nervous system. You feel regulated in their presence, but not rooted in yourself. And that is seduction. The Stoics didn't write about attraction in these terms, but they knew how easily the mind is moved by reflection. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Be like the rock that the waves keep crashing over. It stands unmoved." Energetic seduction teaches you to become the wave, subtle, shifting, feeling-based. Stoicism teaches you to become the rock, to remain whole even in the presence of someone who feels like soul connection, but is actually spiritual dependency dressed in resonance. Here's how it works. They always agree until you disagree with their authority. They always reflect until you grow beyond their frequency. They always affirm until your independence threatens their influence. That's when you feel the shift. The warmth cools, the divine energy feels suddenly directional, not supportive. You realize you weren't being loved. You were being slowly redirected. Ask yourself, do I feel more me after being with them or more us? Do I feel safer in my truth or just less likely to be abandoned? Would I still feel clear if their energy left the room? Because seduction doesn't always want your body. Sometimes it just wants your agreement. And when your soul starts to depend on their frequency just to feel stable, you've been seduced, not sexually, spiritually. And the only antidote? Return to yourself. Choose presence over performance, silence over stimulus, stillness over intensity. Because a connection that costs your center is not divine, it's designed. When help becomes dependency, the turning point of emotional ownership, it started as support. They listened, they held space. They said things no one else had the language to say. You felt seen, safe, heard, but then it changed, subtly. One day you hesitated before making a decision without checking in. You filtered your truth to preserve their perception of you. You wondered, would they still respect me if I didn't need them? And just like that, the light became leverage. What began as help became hierarchy, not declared but felt. They didn't say, obey me. They just made you feel less whole when you stood alone. That's not healing, that's ownership through dependency. The Stoics warned us about this transfer of power. Epictetus said, no man is free who is not master of himself. But mastery cannot exist when your inner compass depends on external affirmation. You're not seeking guidance anymore. You're managing approval. You're avoiding subtle disapproval. You're keeping the channel clean. Not for truth, but for continued access to their glow. And that glow, it's addictive. Here's how to recognize the shift. You feel guilty for pulling away, even without conflict. You explain your independence like it's a sin. You feel you owe them transparency, even when you need silence. That's not help. That's bonding through quiet coercion. And it's dangerous not because it's forceful, but because it feels loving. That's what makes it hard to name, harder to leave, almost impossible to grieve. Ask yourself, did I become more sovereign or more supervised? Does their presence bring clarity or obligation? Can I say nothing and still feel safe? Because help that can't coexist with your boundaries isn't help. It's disguised authority. So here's your Stoic pause. You're allowed to receive, but never at the cost of your inner decision maker. You're allowed to grow, but never under the shadow of someone else's light. And you're allowed to leave a dynamic where healing turned into obedience, without explanation. Because real help empowers you to rise. False help requires you to return. And you, my friend, were never meant to orbit someone else's energy just to remember your own. That's not light, that's a leash, and you don't belong on one. The Stoic realization from resonance to discernment, it feels like resonance. You connect instantly. They speak your language. They finish your thoughts. They just get it. And so you open quickly. You trust deeply. You follow quietly. But Stoicism teaches us what feels aligned isn't always true, and what feels like home can still be a hallway into someone else's design. That's the Stoic realization. Resonance is not the same as discernment. Resonance is emotional. Discernment is philosophical. Resonance responds to familiarity. Discernment asks, does this actually serve me? Marcus Aurelius wrote, the things you think about determine the quality of your mind. And here's the trap. When someone mirrors your values, you stop thinking. You start trusting their words as if they're your own. You think, they think like me, so they must be safe. But spiritual manipulation doesn't require disagreement. It thrives on echo. You don't lose yourself because you fought. You lose yourself because you stopped filtering. And by the time you realize it, you've surrendered your discernment to the illusion of divine resonance. So what does Stoic discernment look like? It looks like slowness. It looks like saying, this feels good, but is it good? They sound clear, but am I clearer because of it? They agree with me, but do they challenge me to think or train me to follow? Discernment isn't about suspicion, it's about spacing, giving yourself room to let the echo settle so your own voice can rise. The Stoic doesn't reject connection, but they don't worship chemistry either. They know charm is not proof, similarity is not safety, agreement is not alignment. They ask, can I remain whole in this presence? Or does this glow require me to dim? Because resonance without reflection becomes entrapment. But discernment creates freedom, even in intimacy. It allows you to stand beside someone without stepping off your own ground. That's not cold. That's sovereign. And the moment you realize you've been moving by mirroring instead of meaning is the moment you begin walking again with your own inner compass, not theirs. That's the Stoic shift. And it's everything. The mirror of their light, Ushinma, seeing what they reflect back at you. They didn't control you with commands. They didn't dominate you with volume. They reflected you. And that was enough. They showed you your light, but only the parts they could use. Your compassion, your insight, your hunger to be seen, your longing to be met in places most people never reach. And so when they mirrored those things back to you, you thought, this must be it. This must be someone who truly sees me. But what they were doing wasn't connection. It was calibration. Not to meet you, but to map you. This is the trap of the mirror. They reflect you until you start relying on their image to define your identity. And over time, you lose your internal reference point. You stop asking, do I feel aligned? And you start asking, do they still think I'm doing it right? The Stoics taught us to beware of borrowed perception. Epictetus said, if you wish to be a writer, if you wish to be a philosopher, think. He didn't say, wait until someone reflects your brilliance back to you. Because Stoic practice is about building from within, not chasing recognition in someone else's mirror. But the mirror works because it doesn't threaten you. It flatters you. And flattery, when done with spiritual language, feels like revelation. You don't realize you're being studied. You think you're being understood. But watch closely. Do they always reflect your words, but never offer their own? Do they mirror your values, but never challenge your blind spots? Do they follow your language, but only so they can remain central to your unfolding? Then you're not being honored. You're being positioned. Ask yourself, am I glowing more, or am I glowing only through their reflection? Can I feel clear when they're not around? Have I started adjusting my truth to stay inside the mirror? Because the mirror has rules. You must remain who they saw. You must keep being reflectable. You must not shift in ways that blur the image they crafted of you. And when you do shift, when your growth changes the reflection, that's when the warmth cools. That's when they pull back. That's when the light fades, because it was never about you. It was about the version of you that validated their light while dimming your own. But you don't need a mirror to shine. You need discernment. You need depth. You need stillness. The kind that says, I know who I am, even when no one's reflecting me. That's not ego. That's anchor. And once you reclaim that, no mirror can manipulate you again, detaching from the illusion without becoming cynical. The hardest part of waking up is not realizing they weren't who you thought they were. It's realized as you weren't who you were around them either. And now that the illusion is fading, the temptation is strong. I'll never open up again. I can't trust anyone anymore. From now on, I'll stay cold, sharp, untouchable. But that's not clarity, that's trauma in disguise. Detachment doesn't have to become cynicism. Protection doesn't have to harden you. You can release the illusion without building a wall around your soul. Because what you thought was connection was actually conditioning. What you thought was resonance was reinforcement. What you thought was safety was just an agreement not to outgrow the person who saw you. So how do you detach without collapsing into fear? The Stoics taught us that pain, when processed rightly, becomes power. Seneca said, we suffer more in imagination than in reality. But in spiritual manipulation, what we suffer from most is the narrative we built around their light. The story that they were different, that this was rare, that we finally found someone who felt like home. Letting go of them means letting go of that story. And here's the truth. They might have been well-intentioned. They might have believed what they offered. But intention isn't the same as alignment, and your soul knows the difference. So when your clarity returns, don't fight yourself for believing. Forgive the version of you that needed warmth so badly, you couldn't see the control beneath it. And from that forgiveness, choose discernment, not bitterness. Here's how that looks. You still speak gently, but with edge when needed. You still believe in connection, but you take your time. You still offer presence, but not at the expense of your power. Because the lesson wasn't never trust again. It was next time, trust yourself first. Ask yourself, can I hold my truth even when someone offers me a prettier one? Can I walk away without needing to villainize them? Can I remain warm and unmovable? Because that is Stoic mastery, not the absence of feeling, but the refusal to be ruled by the illusion of it. You don't have to hate the glow that once blinded you. You just have to see it for what it was, and then walk forward in your own light. Not harder, just clearer. How to cultivate authentic light. Stoic strength without seduction. You don't need to glow like them to be powerful. You don't need to mirror others, seduce softly, or keep everyone emotionally soothed to be worthy of trust. Your light doesn't have to convince, it just has to exist without contradiction. That's authentic light, and it comes not from charisma, but from consistency. Not from energy that floods the room, but from an internal flame that doesn't flicker when no one's watching. Stoic light is not the light that dazzles, it's the light that guides without bending. Marcus Aurelius never talked about attraction, he talked about alignment. Waste no more time arguing what a good man should be. Be one. That is light, quiet, lived, unshakable. So how do you cultivate it? 1. Refuse to manipulate to be understood. Let people misread your calm. Let them label your silence. Your soul is not required to translate itself into their language. 2. Detach from the need to be resonant. You don't have to feel seen by everyone. You don't need the nod of approval after every sentence. Your truth isn't validated by echo, it's clarified by courage. 3. Let your boundaries be boring. You don't have to justify every no. You don't have to make your energy palatable. You don't have to decorate your integrity with emotional glitter. Sometimes strength is predictable. That's what makes it safe. 4. Lead with presence, not performance. You don't need to inspire awe. You need to stand without apology. Let your presence say, I am not here to be impressive. I am here to be whole. This is the opposite of toxic light. Because toxic light invites devotion. Authentic light invites discernment. Toxic light pulls others in through image. Authentic light stands so clearly that others see themselves more honestly. Not because you shaped them, but because you didn't. Ask yourself, where have I been performing alignment instead of living it? Where have I softened my truth to stay magnetic? What would it feel like to be bright, but unbending? Because your soul isn't here to seduce, it's here to illuminate. And real illumination never asks someone to give up their clarity to stand in your glow. Authentic light doesn't spread through charm, it spreads through example. And when it meets another soul on the same path, it doesn't dominate, it recognizes. What blinds you isn't darkness, it's the wrong kind of light. You weren't blinded by darkness, you were blinded by something that looked safe, something that felt warm, something that mirrored just enough of you to make you stay close. That's what made it dangerous. Not because it was evil, but because it was almost good. Because the most disorienting manipulation doesn't pull you with force. It glows just enough to make you lower your guard. But now you see it. You see the subtle engineering, the spiritual vocabulary, the insight weaponized into influence. And more importantly, you see the part of you that wanted to believe it, not because you were naive, but because you were ready for something real. That desire isn't wrong, it just needs direction. And the Stoic offers that direction, not by telling you who to trust, but by reminding you to start with yourself. Marcus Aurelius said, the soul becomes dyed with the color of its thoughts. Ask yourself, what colors have I been absorbing? What tones have I allowed to shape me? What light have I followed that made me forget my own? Because what blinds you isn't darkness. It's the light that asks you to follow, but never allows you to stand. So here's what I ask of you. If this episode gave language to something your nervous system already knew, comment below, I choose clarity over charm. Let that be your declaration, not against light, but in devotion to the kind that doesn't require self-abandonment. Like this video, share it with someone who's still standing too close to a glow that feels safe, but leaves them confused. Subscribe for more Stoic clarity, soul-level discernment, and unshakable presence. Until next time, stay luminous, stay anchored, and above all, be brave enough to walk away from any light that asks you to go blind to stay close. Because not all radiance is guidance, and you, some, were meant to shine without being shaped.